The most recent student debt stats are out, and let's just say they're not pretty, kind of like a hangover. According to the projection on student debt, two-thirds, not like anyone in college drinks or anything, two-thirds of seniors graduated from public and private four-year colleges in 2011 had student debt. Now, you want to know what the average debt was? $26,000. That should sober you up after nickel beer night. That's up 5% from the average student loan debt in 2010. But really, it shouldn't be all that surprising that student loan debt is at an all-time high since 2008 when President Obama was elected. Tuition for the average public four-year college has increased 25%. And all that happened under a president who was supposed to revitalize our student loan system with a law he called, and I quote, one of the most significant investments in higher education since the GI Bill. Remember, it was supposed to eliminate fees to private banks, which are acting as intermediaries, providing college student debt loans. And then the $68 billion in fees we were supposed to save was supposed to go to expand Pell Grants and make it easier for students to pay those loans.
But I didn't stand with the banks and the financial industries in this fight. That's not why I came to Washington. And neither did any of the members of Congress who are here today. We stood with you. We stood with America's students.
You know, the funny thing is the difference in the GI Bills, you actually had to serve in the military to get it. But, right, Mr. President, you always stand with the people against those evil banks. Well, guess what? Your law not only hurt our economy, but made student debt worse than it was. So why don't we just take the economic advice from a guy who really knows what he's talking about, Milton Friedman. He never would have encouraged legislation that redistributed wealth and discouraged greed.
The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear, that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
Now I have the pleasure of speaking with someone who defends the principles of Milton Friedman. Here with me is Robert Enlow, the president of the Friedman Foundation. How you doing, sir?
Fine. How are you, Andrew?
I don't know which video I like better, the pencil video or that one, or any time you might have talked to Phil Donahue.
Well, I love that video that you just showed. It's my favorite clip of Milton Friedman and a perfect defense of free enterprise.
Now, the funny thing is the difference between Obama's education loan reformation package, whatever he wants to call it, and the GI Bills, you actually had to serve. You actually had to earn it. You didn't just get it because you were there and the government took pity on you.
Well, that's right. And the other thing that was different about the GI Bill, people had a choice. The servicemen who came back could go to any college, private or public, or even religious. That's not what we have now, certainly in K-12 education and in higher education. One stat that I think you might find really interesting, you talked about the tuition increase in higher ed of 25%. You know, 43% of the students who start post-secondary education fail to earn a degree after 6 years. We've got productivity problems and spending problems, and it's a crisis that's going to hurt our economy for years in the future.
Well, what amazes me about this liberal view of economics, or progressive, whatever you want to call it, they're taking giant chunks of money or capital out of the private economy to put into these student loan programs versus students having to qualify for them. But if they're taking money away from the private sector, and then they can't understand why these kids can't get a job, well, the more money you take from the private sector, the fewer people they're going to hire no matter where you went to school.
Well, that's right. They're basically nationalizing the student loan debt, and we're now at over $1 trillion in student loans owed by all the children and the students in this country. But here's the crazy thing about it. Not only are we at $1 trillion, guess who they pay that money back to when they nationalize the debt? They pay that back to themselves in the form of bloat. You know, the Friedman Foundation just did a study of the K-12 bloat in America. And here's what I mean by that. From 1950 to 2009, the enrollment in public schools went up 96%. But the number of teachers went up 256%, and the number of non-teaching personnel went up 702%. So they're nationalizing all this, taking taxpayer dollars, and then giving it back to themselves in the form of payments to non-teachers personnel.